City officials recently strengthened Boston's commitment to being a haven for immigrants, but without compromising public safety. It's a commitment that has been affirmed in recent years by the Boston Public Schools. But questions about that commitment have been spurred by new disclosures made possible in connection with a lawsuit filed by Lawyers for Civil Rights over the issue of information from the schools being made available to the Federal Agency for Immigration Enforcement. To tell us about the new information is the group's Civil Rights Fellow, Janelle Dempsey. Thank you very much for being with us, Janelle.
Thank you for having me.
Janelle, I know this is not exactly about the Boston Public Schools calling ICE on the phone and say, hey, we got another incident report here, do you want to look at it? But there is a flow, so could you describe that flow?
Right, so Boston Public Schools, they produce student incident reports. And what we know is that BPS is responsible for getting those reports to BRIC, the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, it is housed within Boston Police Department, but it is partially funded by Homeland Security. And there's been at least one incident where one such report that was transferred to BRIC by BPS got in the hands of ICE, and a student was deported. And what these new reports show is that there have in fact been at least 135 incidents where student reports were transferred to BRIC, which is incredibly disturbing and concerning for all of us.
Well, the school department says they never specify a student's immigration status when they compile one of these reports. So how would somebody at ICE be able to pick up a report and saying, that looks like a good target? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, the issue is that BPS should not be sharing any student records with BRIC because it could get into the hands of ICE. So we don't have all the answers. This is an ongoing litigation, and Lawyers for Civil Rights is still working to get BPS to be transparent and to produce records with more information that they've redacted so far, including demographic information, which would be very important for us to know.
Now, there was one student from East Boston High School who was deported a couple of years ago after supposedly threatening to shoot up a school. A lot of people might hear that and say, well, good riddance, but what about some of these other cases? I mean, what kind of things are in those reports that we're supposed to be so concerned about?
So the specifics of that report are very limited because what BPS has produced has been so heavily redacted. And so far, what we know of the other reports, there's a wide range of incidents that occurred, including graffiti and disturbing school assembly. And so these are nonviolent incidents that, for whatever reason, BPS felt were important enough to pass over to Homeland Security.
What about identifying the race of the students? You know, sometimes that can be innocuous because we do it so much, but potentially going to ICE, what does that mean?
That is incredibly concerning for us, and that is one of the things that Lawyers for Civil Rights is pushing for BPS to release to us and to the public, because we feel that it is very important that we understand the demographics of the students whose reports are being sent to BRIC, because for the potential of racial profiling. And thus far, BPS has not produced that information, it has not made it public, and we and the community are very, very adamant that it needs to be released.
Now, I can see a report that mentions a white kid getting into a fight, and I said, well, no big deal. I was a white kid. I got into fights when I was that age. But in the mind of an investigator, if they see Latino kid, black kid, what's going on?
Well, it depends on what they do with that information. And I think that's why LCR is pursuing this litigation in order to get more demographic information out to the public.
Now, these school officials and city officials also say that, you know, in the past year or two, things have gotten even tighter as far as controlling information that is eventually made available to people like ICE. Do you see any changes at all in that direction?
We don't know. We don't know. And so the records that BPS has provided thus far only go up to, I believe it's the beginning of 2018. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Of course, another thing that's in my mind is that you have intelligence. Intelligence can mean many different things. It can mean solid facts. It can mean inferences. What's in these reports? Are both of those, is that what we're talking about really?
So in terms of intelligence, so BRIC is an intelligence sharing organization. Its purpose is to share intelligence, information about goings-on in the Boston area with various agencies, including ICE, as we've seen in at least one incident. In terms of the information that is contained in these reports, we know some of it. We don't know all of it because so much of it has been redacted. So it can include details about the incident, whether it's a juvenile or an adult, the overall classification of the incident, but there's still a lot left unknown.
Or how do you decide whether somebody belongs to a gang?
Right.
What about people who've been maybe most affected by this, whether it's someone who actually did get into custody or maybe who might have it on their mind, thinking about it? Have you talked to people who've been living with that?
So a lot of our community partners have relayed to us just the overall fear of families sending their kids to school. So LCR is very adamant that everyone should feel safe at school, and families should feel safe sending their kids to school without having to fear ICE and deportation. So, this Boston is a sanctuary city, and we've adopted sanctuary city policies because we do not support law enforcement getting involved with immigration. And if that's the case in the city as a whole, why is it that ICE has any place in our public schools? It has to end.
Now, it's not new that officials of Boston have been concerned about gangs and violence. I'm sure they don't want any students being harmed by that. But when you saw that there were 135 reports, at least, that might have gone through BRIC to wherever they go next, did that surprise you?
Does it surprise me that there are 135?
Yes.
It certainly surprises me, especially considering that initially Boston said, no, this never happens. And then they admitted, okay, well, there was this one incident in East Boston, and now we're seeing that there are at least 135 incidents. It is incredibly concerning because where does it end? Did it end with that 135? I would say probably not. Until we see evidence otherwise, there's no reason to believe that it stops at 135, which, especially considering where we've started, is horrifying. And then when you think about the fact that these are kids, these are children that we're talking about who are just trying to go to school and get an education. And it's just, BPS should not be sending any records to BRIC, to ICE, period.
Well, this is a lawsuit you're litigating, you're trying to get more information. That's normal, but what do you hope to get from this?
Ultimately, LCR hopes that there is transparency for the community from BPS so that we're able to see the full scope of this issue. And we hope that any policies that have allowed these at least 135 records to get into the hands of BRIC and ICE ends and is changed. And then whatever new policies are adopted, that they are followed and implemented.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Janelle Dempsey from Lawyers for Civil Rights.